Hey everybody, welcome to the Cardone Solutions Podcast. I am your host of the Cardone Solutions Podcast. My name is David Bradley, Senior Sales and Marketing Manager with Grant Cardone. Today's episode is pretty awesome. I'm talking to a gentleman named Jonathan O'Brien. Jonathan O'Brien is an executive recruiter, meaning he goes out and he finds, well, you know what, I'm going to let him talk to you about that. But what we do in this episode, and the reason that we're doing this is that a couple days ago, I'm on the phone with Jonathan. We're having a conversation about some of the challenges he faces as an executive recruiter. He's bought multiple products of ours. He's on Cardone University right now. He's read the 10X rule. And as we start talking, I thought, man, this guy would be a great guest on the Cardone Solutions podcast for a couple reasons. Number one, he knows our material. Number two, he's using our material, right? Because it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to use it, right? He's using our content every single day to generate business for himself and his company. And so I thought getting his insight, because two things are happening. Number one, he's in executive recruiting, and then also he's on the phone a lot. So are you on the phone a lot? Is that right? Is there maybe, would it be helpful to get some ideas from somebody who's on the phone a lot and also has this crazy task of building trust with people over the phone, making cold calls, getting that trust, right? We're going to talk about a couple different things, how he's applied Grant's principle between the difference between a contact and a contract. I actually just alluded to that. We're going to talk about how he uses the 4 degrees of action. We're going to talk about the importance of handling gatekeepers. Okay. We're also going to look at, he mentioned this really cool thing about how he doesn't go for any B calls. He only wants A calls and what he means by that and how he goes about doing that. We get into a little bit of social media and how he uses that as an executive recruiter. Great episode. So without further ado, allow me to present to you Jonathan O'Brien, executive recruiter for Velocity. Okay, and we're live. All right. So, hey, ladies and gentlemen, those of you listening and watching from home, this is the Cardone Solutions Podcast. I'm your host. My name is David Bradley. Today, I'm with my good buddy, Jonathan O'Brien. He is an executive recruiter. And what we're going to talk about today is applying the 10X rule to executive recruiting. But what I always like to do is make sure that we totally understand what that means and what that is. So number one, Jonathan, welcome. Thank you for being here. And then number two, man, what exactly does it mean to be an executive recruiter?
Well, Dave, first of all, thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate it. What it means to be an executive recruiter is that when you're working for multiple organizations all throughout the US, big or small, you're working on high level opportunities, C-suite opportunities that only a certain, they're so niche, they're so targeted, they're so specific with what a company is looking for. So you're primarily responsible for reaching out to passive or active candidates that might be in the market, and you present the opportunity to them and see if there's any interest, and then you go from there.
Okay, cool. So so you go out there, you've got a company that is looking for a C-suite executive. Your
Yes.
job basically is to go out and find them, okay?
Exactly.
Recruit them and bring them over. So like, what does a day in your life look like?
Well, I guess, David, it really depends on what the volume looks like. If you're running a lot of jobs, you're going to be on the phone 99% of the time, easily.
Yeah.
You'll be continuing just to crank, just to make a bunch of calls. Kind of with along the lines of what Grant teaches. It really is a contact sport. I really feel the more contact you have, the better the chances of you getting in contact with them will be. I heard some percentage of, it's not the first time that you get in contact with a person, it's the 6th, 7th, and 8th time. So you have to continue to be persistent.
Yeah.
You have to continue to think, what am I not doing that I could be doing? And if I am doing it, am I doing it the best I can? And if I'm not, you got to try to figure it out and try to figure out what the best plan of action is to move forward.
So the other day when we were talking, you had mentioned that the 10X rule, and I'd asked you sort of like what has been your favorite, biggest game changer book of grants, and you said it was the 10X rule. And
Yes.
so, and the main reason we're here is I really want to look at and get from you sort of how you've applied that book and the principles within it to being an executive recruiter. So one of the things that we learned early on, or that I learned from Grant pretty early on, was that the difference between a contact and a contract is literally the letter R. And the letter R stands for relationship. And if you, for those of you listening, if you're on Cardone University, you've heard Grant talk about that over and over and over again. And so how important is the relationship part as an executive recruiter? And then what has been your most successful action as an executive recruiter in building and maintaining relationships?
So I would say there definitely has to be a level of trust. When you're ever on the phone talking with a candidate, you want to have a level of trust that, hey, you're looking out for their best interests. You know, if you have position X and they're at position Y, it's just not going to be a fit. But if let's say, for example, the role is not a fit, but they could have an opportunity that might be higher up,
Mm,
like the client that you're working directly on behalf of might have a position higher up, then you're going to do whatever you can to see if there's any interest in them at least having a conversation to discuss the role. So um, one thing that I will say that I really love about Grant, about the content, is the whole thing of, it always seems like Grant goes above and beyond with everything that he does. And as a recruiter, in order to be successful, you have to go above and beyond in everything that you're doing,
mm.
big or small. You have to, if you're not available at a certain time, make yourself available. If a person, if I was working on a position that was so difficult to fill, and if they were only available at Sunday at 5 a.m. in the morning, I'm gonna make sure that I'm available at 5 a.m. in the
Taking that
morning
call.
to take that call.
Yeah. Now, within, we'll talk about your company in a second, but within
Sure.
that, do you find that by going the extra mile and by building and maintaining those relationships, and that by exceeding this expectation of in terms of follow-up, you talked about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, up to 12 different touch points, does that
Absolutely.
separate you from the competition?
Well, I think that the important thing is to continue to be persistent. As an executive recruiter, you have to be persistent.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes what happens is you might talk with somebody where they're not interested now in making a change, but hey, guess what? A month later, they might be. There was one job that I was working on where I got in contact with this person, never responded to me, ghosted me basically.
Right.
And about a month later, he shoots me an email saying I'm now open to hearing about opportunities. And I mean, things just changed that quickly. And you have to build, when I say trust, you want to be the person that they go to when they're keeping their options open. You don't want them to go through the Rolodex, if they still have those nowadays, um, of going through all these recruiters that they connect with. You want to be the person at the top. You want to be a person that they remember. And
The
I think
first
that's
one they
really
think
important.
of.
Exactly.
Right. So like the guys, hey, I'm in market now, I gotta call my guy Jonathan.
Exactly.
Right? It should be that fast. That's awesome.
Exactly. You got to be number one. You got to be number one on that dial,
And that's
because you
from
want them to remember.
having, building, and maintaining that relationship.
Exactly. Exactly. Because you want
So
to you want to say, Jonathan had that great opportunity for me last time. I'm going to call him up and see what he's got for me right now.
right, because you've dominated their thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's 10x. Um, Speaking of the 10x rule, Grant talks about, it's early in the book. He mentions the 4 degrees of action, right? Which is
Yes.
right. It's do nothing. It's retreat. It's normal levels or massive. So in terms of you building a pipeline, how have you leveraged that thinking and that concept with building a pipeline?
Well, I mean, Grant hit the nail right on the head when he said you got to build your pipeline up. Um, One thing that I do is, let's say if my pipeline is low for whatever reason, I try to go ahead and make extra additional effort to try to reach out to people that it might not have been in contact with. So, or if let's say so many times when you're working on a position, it doesn't go well for whatever reason. And Grant has said this. Sometimes you just have a rough day where nothing seems to be going right,
Yeah.
and you're putting in the effort, you're putting in the time, you're putting in the energy, you're showing excitement on the phone. You're doing everything that you can, but for some reason the jobs that you're working on are just not going that well. So sometimes it might be good to jump on somebody else's job and see if they want to switch.
Mm,
See if you can get in contact with them that way.
right. Love that. So we talk a lot about that in Sell or Be Sold. We talk about that in Cardone University. It's where if you're not, if it ain't working for you, go help somebody else.
Absolutely.
Right? Gets you out of your head, helps you help somebody else, you get to be of service, and you get a win somehow, right? And that's what's most important, because production yields happiness. So you get that win, gets you jacked up and excited. You can get back to what you were doing, get back on your pipeline. Dude, I love that. That's fantastic. What
Because discouragement can be your best friend. I mean, you can just be like, oh man, I'm struggling through this day, I'm not getting any interest, and then you go and you just get in contact with a bunch of people and somebody else's job, and you feel a billion times better. Then you can go back with renewed confidence and go back to whatever you were doing, like you said.
Yeah, I love that. So your outflow, how many calls a day do you usually make?
It really depends, David. I mean, some days it might be near 150, 175 outbound, and some
Okay.
days it might be in the 100 range.
Yeah.
But when I'm in that 100 range, I am doing other things other than calling. I'm shooting out emails. I'm shooting out just various forms of communication to candidates.
Right. And if you, I mean, the reality is you may be dialing, but if you're connecting, your call volume is going to go down because your talk time's going up.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
Yeah. It's a line that you see. Some days you might have better contact than others. It's funny. We always joke in my office that some days it feels like nobody's picking up, and then other days everybody's picking up.
yeah, I think that's a pretty common experience that anybody that makes, whether it's cold or warm calls for a living, but if you're on the phone, some days everybody picks up and then other days it's voicemail central, and it's, yeah, that's pretty normal.
Tumbleweeds all over the place.
Yeah, that's pretty common. So, and I think another thing that's relatively common that, people, telesales and cold calling and recruiting, and I think we all run into gatekeepers a lot. Do you have any like advice or tips, or like how have you used the 10X rule and Grant's training to move past a gatekeeper and continue on? Like, you're gonna have to build a relationship with them too, right?
You are absolutely, especially when you're working on C-suite opportunities. You need to build a good rapport with the gatekeeper.
Oh yeah.
You just do. There's no way around it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they're gonna once you get off the phone, they're either gonna take your message or they're gonna throw it in the trash, and they're never gonna give it to them.
Right. Oh man, I thought I was the only one that had that in my head. Like, I leave my name and number, and like, part of me imagines, like, as soon as the call is over and I get off, she's like,
Exactly. Exactly.
I
That's
thought I
true.
was the only one. It's
I,
good.
I I mean, I've been there where you're on the phone and you're just not building a good rapport with the gatekeeper, and for whatever reason, it's just not going well. And you're like, man, that call stunk.
Right.
Like, I did not have any rapport with the admin at all.
Have
She's
you ever
gonna
left
throw-
a message and you're like, "There's no way she's writing my name and number down"? Like,
Exactly.
you're giving it to her, and in your head, you're like, "There's no way she's writing this down. There is no
Exactly. Oh yeah.
right
Absolutely.
number down."
Click. Moving on. And I mean, eventually you get better over time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something that you have to. It's the. I remember Grant talking about the fact that everybody goes through training in the morning before they make calls.
Right.
Being able to practice it over and over and over again, that there's a lot of truth to that.
Oh yeah.
There is a lot of truth to that.
I've been saying a lot to my clients to try and encourage them to, make sure that they're doing their training in the morning before getting in front of a customer. Two things are happening. Number one, it makes sure that they practice on each other as a team and not practicing on a customer, right? But
Absolutely.
and the logic to that, I think it's interesting because in sales, it doesn't happen at the same frequency as basically every other industry in the world. Like there's not a pitcher in any league, whether that's little or the majors, that doesn't warm up his arm before he takes the mound. It'd be like a kicker in football not warming his leg up before he goes on the field. It's like, why wouldn't you practice and warm up as a salesperson, or even a customer service rep, right? For that matter, like you want to give the best
Absolutely.
performance that you possibly can. You should warm up and practice before. The other day when we were chit-chatting a little bit, you talked about, and I just want you to expand on this, is you talked about
Please.
no B calls, only A calls. And could you just like spitball on that or expand on it a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, company that I'm with, Velocity Resource Group, we one thing that we always strive is to be at our very best in everything that we do, and that's what the A game means. I mean, you get your report card. Everybody wants the A, right? You don't want the
Right.
B, you don't want the C, you want the A. So the reason why A game is broad is because you want the absolute best in everything that you're doing, whether it be sending out an email, whether it be giving them a call, whether it be whatever else you're doing to help take the company to the next level. That's what you have to bring your best in everything that you do. And that's what the A game means. That's what we strive to be every single day that we're working there.
So how do you reset? Let's just say 1:30 in the afternoon, you finished lunch, you came back, you made a couple calls, you got on with somebody, and it just like bombed, like it was like an awful call. And now you got food in your belly, you may be a little under caffeinated, and now you just had a really bad call. Like, how do you make sure that the next call isn't impacted by the last call?
So the beauty of one thing that we're always told is that whenever somebody says no, that's one more no to a yes. That the next no you get is one more to a yes. So if you just think about that hey, even though that person was not interested, they chewed me up on the phone, they did not like what I had to say, they didn't care, they are extremely happy with their work, and they have no interest in changing jobs. I get that.
Right.
It happens. But
Yeah.
you have to just let it roll off and move on to the next one, because the very next call could be the difference between our company having a 25 more jobs that are added by that client versus nothing. So it's so small. Like, you could have one interested candidate in one job that could be the difference between a job going well and a job not going well.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time in high school and college doing theater, and then I did some local community theater and some professional work. And one of the things that I was really ingrained very, very early on would be that, and I brought this to sales as best I can. And sometimes, frankly, I'll fail miserably at it. But the idea is that when you're doing a play or a musical or some kind of theatrical production, each show, the audience there has never seen the show before.
Right.
And so you have an obligation to that specific audience to deliver the best version of your production as you possibly can. And you need to do that tomorrow night too, because they've never seen it. And if you're touring, like when you're in LA and you're doing Les Miserables, you got to do the best version of Les Miserables in Los Angeles. And then when you get to Frisco, it's the same thing, because it's that, each audience is different and they deserve the best. And so for me, when I make cold calls or just general sales calls, and I'm always looking for the next call. How do I bring the best version of me to that specific call? And I try very, very hard. And as I said, sometimes I'll fail miserably at it, but I try very, very hard to not bring anything that happened on the last call to this one.
Right.
I love that. It's very important. So, we talked about this earlier too, but like Grant talks a lot about, he advises business professionals to really just do what the competition refuses to do. And exploit that almost, if you will, right? And so if you were, let's say you found yourself at an executive recruiter convention, or maybe you're at a bar and you bumped into another executive recruiter and they were just starting out, what kind of advice would you give them in terms of doing what the competition refuses to do? How could they do that at the beginning of their career and see a real difference that would enhance the rest of their career, if that makes sense?
It does. I would say hit the ground running. I mean, you have to be putting in a lot of hours to be able to be able to build rapport with candidates. It it takes a while to be able to get candidates trust and to be
Yeah.
able to, you have to be continuing to just pound the pavement, just reaching out and just seeing. One thing that we pride ourselves on at Velocity Resource Group is referrals.
Mm.
So we ask, if you're not interested, you know anybody that might be? And, it's that's something that you have to do every single call to try to get interest, to try to see if there's interest. So I would say to just continue to make as many calls as you can on a day-by-day basis. Make yourself available whenever. If a candidate is only available for those 10 minutes of the day, like I mentioned earlier, 5 o'clock on Sunday morning, if they're available, take the call, because that could be the difference between the job that you're working on being a success and not being a success.
Oh yeah.
So you have to be, there are people that are so focused on working the 9 to 5. You have to be the one that's willing to go above that 9 to 5 to be able to say, yes, I can make myself available at 8 o'clock at night, or yes, I can make myself available at 10 o'clock on a Saturday. Other people are taking time off and enjoying time off. You have to be thinking, this is the difference between this job not going well and this job going well. So you gotta make yourself available and continue just to pound the phones as hard as you can.
I would imagine that the 8 o'clock at night call that comes in from an executive is probably the guy that has had it up to about here, right? And he wound up staying late for on a project, and even more BS popped up, and now he's really upset, and he's like, man, I deserve better than this. I need to be with a better company. And that's when you get the call. And the 9 to 5er, either he's not taking the call, or he's going to shelve that guy, say, hey, let me call you in the morning or something, and not literally let that guy. And then there is no trust. There's no
Exactly.
relationship at all, because you didn't hear him out.
Exactly.
Like, all that guy needed to do right now is talk,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
It's that's something that I definitely would say to an executive recruiter is you have to make yourself available. You
Yeah,
really do. And if you're not going to, the job, it's just not cut out for you. Let's just be fully transparent. I
not the
mean,
right thing.
exactly. I mean, there are plenty of jobs that offer a flexible work schedule, but as a recruiter, you have to be willing to put in the additional time and effort to get in touch with people.
Yeah, that is not a, postal type of banking hour kind of a gig.
Right.
Um, so at Velocity, you so a company would say, hey, we're looking for people, go out and find us, right?
Hmm.
But at the same time, if there's a guy who's like what I was mentioning earlier, he's like, man, I'm over this place, I deserve better. um, is that part of your pipeline?
It is. I mean, it's. I would say that, if the person has the right experience, it really is dependent on the opportunity that we're working on at the time,
Right.
right? I mean, we're always happy. I mean, if somebody says I'm open to chatting about opportunities, I'm always going to pick up the phone and talk with them, and at least give them encouragement, because one thing that I feel people get really quickly in the job market is discouragement. It,
Mm-hmm.
it just that just is something that happens. So if somebody is open to hearing about opportunities, I'll chat with them and I'll talk with them, and I'll direct them to our website and show them a little bit about who we are, and we might have an opportunity for them, we might not, but at least then we can talk with them and just see where they're at. They might, let's say for example that for whatever reason there's just no opportunity for them, Well, we connect. We say, hey, do you know what? Do you have anybody else that's kind of looking for work? Let's say
Right.
that they do. That person could be hired for a job that we're running right now, or
Right.
they might be running. We might be running in about a month's time. So it's uh, it's not to sound like a broken record, but going back to that level of trust to be able to say, well, even though not a fit right now, we have an opportunity right now that you're a fit for. Would you be interested? And
Right.
it's, again, building that level of trust moving forward that can be the difference between, you know, a lot of hires and no hires.
Right. Right. What is how do you use, is LinkedIn a thing? Is that something that is that a big deal for you? Do you leverage that hard?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We sure do. Yep, we use that. We use quite a few different tools. Um, just to network with people, to connect with them, just to see if there's any interest. Yeah, we have a wide variety of tools and resources that we use to connect with candidates.
Social media, even on a broader scale beyond LinkedIn. How do you
Yes.
leverage that?
So you have to figure out the best. You got to figure out the best plan of action moving forward. Recruiting. There's always innovation that's happening in recruiting.
Hmm.
So you got to figure out what your plan is moving forward to get in contact with candidates, whether it be on social media, whether it be, again, through email or by phone. What is going to be the way that they respond? And
Yeah.
you have to try to figure that out.
Well, and speaking of contact, if whoever's listening to this, if it turns out that you have a company and you need some C-level dudes, or you are a C-level dude and you want to maybe start looking at some opportunities of switching and leveling up, how do people reach out to you? So it's Jonathan O'Brien, and then you're at Velocity. What's
Yes.
the best way to get a hold of you?
I can provide you my personal email. I'm happy to do that.
Lay it on us.
I got two emails. I'll provide you my personal one. I'll provide you my work one. They can
Okay.
reach out. You can reach out to me at either one. I check them. I check them daily.
Okay.
Uh,
Just say it out. Give us your work email. Say it out loud.
J O'Brien, so JOBRIEN at velocityresourcegroup.com. And that's VELOCITY resource RESOURCE group GROUP.com. J O'Brien at velocityresourcegroup.com.
Love it. And then, and I mentioned LinkedIn. So you're obviously on there, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So there you have it, folks. If you have any interest in having a conversation with Jonathan about either being recruited or doing some recruiting, feel free to reach out to him. Thank you so much for coming on today. Is there anything else that you wanted to add or just throw on there? I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah, likewise, David. Again, Velocity Resource Group, in case anybody was wanting to know who we are, we're an on-demand recruitment partner. We work directly with companies on a domestic, international level. We connect candidates with opportunities. So always happy to chat. Yeah, my email's there. Don't hesitate to shoot me a note. Happy to speak with you and connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks, David.
Okay. Hey, wasn't that cool, right? What'd you get out of that? Leave some comments below about some things that you learned from Jonathan that you're going to start implementing in your sales strategy, in your cold calling, in your relationship building, in your contract and pipeline filling, right? And hey, we talked about Cardone University in there a little bit. If you do not have that program yet, whether that is for yourself or for your team, I would like to offer you 7 days free access to that program. Okay. To take advantage of that, I want you to go to this website, cardonesolutions.com/10x your team. There's going to be a couple videos from Grant. There's going to be some really cool tips on training, whether that's yourself or your team. And then there's going to be a place for you to register to get on my calendar so that you and I can take a look at how you can use Cardone University for you or your sales team. Think about this for a second. What's one thing you need to be better at as a leader? Or what's one thing you want your salespeople better at? It's usually going to be a couple different things. It's either mindset and attitude. Okay. It's going to be your ability to prospect and generate a pipeline. It's going to be your ability to sell and close, right? Follow up, how to function on the phone. If any of those things resonate with you, if you would like to see a marked, measurable movement, 15 to 30% movement in about 90 days, I will show you how we've done that for over 10,000 companies and small businesses already and how we can do that for you. Go to cardonesolutions.com/10x your team.